You are listening to Resilient Life, the podcast where we explore the power of resiliency. I'm Naketa Ross. It is my hope that listening to this podcast will give you the tools to connect with and increase your resiliency. So join me on this adventure of self-discovery and self-love. Thank you for joining this episode of Resilient Life, the podcast where we explore the power of resiliency. Today we have an amazing guest. He's an educator, but I don't want to tell his story. No one tells your story better than you can, so I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. This week's guest, please start with your name and your chosen profession and anything else you want to share.
Hi, my name is Kareem Neal. I am a high school self-contained special education teacher at Maryville High School in the Phoenix Union High School District. This is my 27th year as a teacher and 17th year at Maryville. Still love the job. I was Arizona State Teacher of the Year in 2019 and the first Arizona teacher inducted into the National Teachers Hall of Fame in 2022.
I love that. I love everything about what you just said. For those who aren't familiar with the kiddos that you work with, can you explain what a self-contained classroom is?
Yes. My students are standard high school 9 through 12. Most of them come in as freshmen at 14. Most of them graduate at 18. However, some can stay longer if we have needs that aren't met on IEPs. Their progress is determined much more by IEPs than standard grading. The students' math and reading scores, psych evaluation scores, usually fall between pre-K and grade 1, or they're not in my program. Typically, students in my class also have some physical needs. Not all students, but there will always be a student or two in my classroom who might require the use of a wheelchair or assistive devices for talking and things like that. They almost all of my students require health aids for things like safety around campus, and even help with academic progress. And my instruction has to be differentiated strongly. I do teach the high school history standards and a high school science standards. I teach history and science. However, it is differentiated greatly so that all students in my class have a chance to learn. Self-contained classrooms, most of the students also do not go out into all of the classrooms of a high school. They use the stick in the other self-contained classrooms besides electives. And lastly, if you saw the program, the way that it is catered to make sure individuals get the needs that have their needs met, it would be a great program for all students. I wish that schools had the capacity to give all pre-K 12 students the opportunity to learn in the kind of environment that allows the differentiated instruction that we have, the small group instruction that we can have, because there's also health aides in my classroom, or they'll call them instructional aides or paraprofessionals. And
I've never
the
heard it described
diagnosis,
like that, Kareem.
if you were wondering about diagnosis, it is autism or mild or moderate intellectual disability. So they'll say MOID or MIID. And also folks with Down syndrome usually fall into one of those categories as well. You were saying you never heard?
I've never heard self-contained classroom described in such a positive way before, and a inclusive, I think is the word I want to say, an inclusive way, how you're saying you wish that all students had, which I'm going to ask you to explain another jargon phrase that you used for people who aren't in education, IEP, in a moment. But I've not heard it described in a way that's so positive and inclusive, saying that all students can benefit from a smaller learning environment. Yeah. So can you explain, you said the word IEP. I know
Yes.
that I know what it means and you know what it means, but not everyone does. So if you can explain that as well,
Yes, so
please.
IEP is an individual education plan, and every student who has an IEP has an education team, and on those education teams, there's always a special education teacher, a general education teacher, district representative who signs things, a parent or a guardian, the student, um, and then service providers if they have them, speech language therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and they all do also have a school psychologist to make sure that they are still falling under special ed requirements to be in a self-contained classroom. And so,
Thank
and in
you.
the IEP, you essentially go over the students' strengths, go over the students' needs, figure out what their goals are for the school year. So that's why it's really individual. So I don't just say I teach history in my class. So right now I am teaching, well, it's economics now. So it was government and economics this year. And so I'm not just teaching income tax, which is what I'm teaching right now, because students in my classroom have IEPs, and for instance, some students' IP might be, they need to understand how to use money. So I'm not going to go on an overview of income tax without making sure that that student understands how money works before we can even get into that kind of stuff. So very individualized. And obviously, we're keeping it under the guise of what can be done at that school. And then we say, okay, what goals can we make that would help the student progress and meet their goals for the year and hopefully have a great transition after high school?
Can I say a couple of things? One, you know this, but I have a daughter who has special needs, and she's been in a self-contained classroom. And when I met you, I was a little bitter because I felt like my daughter had been cheated. Now, she's had a couple of great teachers or good teachers, but she never had a Kareem. You are one of my favorite teachers. I think regardless of the population, you shine with our kids with additional needs. But I think you're just a great teacher in general. Every time I hear you talk about the work that you do, you can just hear your passion, it's this thing that you do where you don't uh, lower your standards for uh, our kids. And it's one of my favorite things about you as an educator is that you adjust, which doesn't mean lower. Does that make sense? And so I don't know if I've ever told you that, but you are one of my favorite educators on the planet. And I've met in my position lots and lots of educators uh, because you do this for the right reason in some magical way. You also haven't, or I haven't seen it. Uh, you're not burned out. Uh, can you talk a little bit about that? I may be wrong. Maybe you're burned out and you hide it really well.
No, I have not, and that was because so I started my teaching career in New Jersey, where I grew up, and I taught there. I was a paraprofessional at the school I taught at. It's called the Developmental Learning Center of New Providence, but it's New Providence, New Jersey, not Rhode Island. And going there, I was learning. So, right, that you're certainly not going to burn out. It's the beginning of my career. I'm 3 years in, and then I moved to Arizona, and I'm at a school that does sensory integration. It's kind of they're under world renowned occupational therapist Lorna Jean King, who passed away years ago. And so we had hug machines and swings and doing a lot of stuff on proprioception. And so I was learning again because in New Jersey we were doing ABA, applied behavior analysis, so it was very strict learning. And then when I got to Maryville, because it's a comprehensive high school, I first tried to shield my kids from the general education population, sorry, because I had some biases of what those students were, and not because of Maryville. That is not me. I grew up in a far tougher place,
Yeah.
but I thought, general ed students, they're kind of wild, they're kind of mean. In my mind, right? I was listening to the world talk about kids sometimes, and so I started like that here. And then when I branched out and saw kind of the beauty of all kids, I then was like, I got to find a way to connect this whole school because I was part of the disconnect for a little while, my first 2 years here. And so I think that keeps me on my toes because it is not just about content, although content has changed a lot too because of technology and things like that. So I am a person who cares. The thought of not being one of the best teachers for me would be scary. The thought of not giving my students everything and having their parents come to IP meetings happy because they're seeing their kids learn new things, like those things would crush me. So I think that's part of me keeping that spirit alive, but also this fight now to just make more inclusive environments in my school and now around the country because I have the opportunity to do that. So I think it keeps me fresh because it's not an easy thing to do. Like we as a population, humans, not this is not Maryvale or anything, humans, we tend to like to hang with our people. And so we do self-segregate as well, right? People don't realize since Brown first board of the education, the school systems are just as segregated, except now it's self-segregation. Now people aren't forced to go to a
Mm.
black school, a white school, a Latino school, a Native American school. And so, you know, I think taking on that such a big thing, while still trying to give my students the best services, I think it keeps me sharp. Um, it keeps me working hard for my students. But also, it's a fun job. If anybody has um, a connection to or they've worked in a self-contained environment, it could be the most fun place in the world because I have a group of students who actually enjoy coming to school. And that is rare for high schoolers. A lot of high schoolers have a hard time with school. They got to get up early, they get lots of work. And my students really love that. And so our classroom community is so fun and full of love. Um, and as a person, when you teach someone something and they learn it, it is a wild feeling. I wish some of those, because I know it, I know you've gone through it, some of those teachers that are kind of slack. Sadly, sometimes in self-contained environments, people are like, we could throw in a movie, we could do some coloring. If they felt the feeling of their students learning things that some of the gen ed students don't understand right now, that feeling is not a feeling that you can really get from anything other than teaching someone something that you know is going to make their life better. So it's good. So I'm
That
never
was
leaving.
beautiful.
They're going to be stuck with my old behind.
That was beautiful. Thank you for that. I want to switch gears a little bit, Kareem. I want to ask you, how do you define resilience?
Oof. Well, when I think about resilience, when I think about most things, I think about it two ways, and the ways that it affects me and the way it affects my students. This is like my worldview all the time. It is, it seems like it might be a lot, but at this point, it's second nature. But, when I think of resilience, I truly think about, what it takes for students who have all kinds of barriers in their way, whether it be the physical barriers I've talked about in my classrooms, the mental barriers I've talked about in my classroom, the barriers of poverty, and all of those things. The resiliency it takes to keep showing up um, is something that I admire in other people. When I watch people who are resilient, I'm like, man, how are they doing this with a smile in their face? How is that student who these concepts are so difficult for them? Maybe, letters on a page blend together. I mean, I'm sitting right in front of a magnifying glass because one of my students, when she is working, she would not be able to see the board without this. And I'm just like, she's still driving though. And so that resiliency to be like, an obstacle's not enough. to stop me from achieving my goals is kind of how I think of it when I look at it in others. When I see people who are just, despite the things, I am going to excel. That's what I think about. And for me, like, I think for me it is when there's something that I'm not good at. Like when people say to me, and they say this to me a lot, I don't know how you do that, teaching those kids. I'm like, oh no, that's easy. I can't lie. For not necessarily prepping for my lessons and waking up early in the morning for a person like me who's a night person, but it is because I really enjoy it. And so it is the thing. I have an intrinsic motivation to do it, right? And when people are like, "Oh, you're traveling around the country and you're busy schedule," those things are easy to me. But when we think about other things like, how I am in relationships, right? How do I give grace to people? Those things are not easy to me. And so for me, it is when I fight through the things that I know do not come easy to me, that's when I feel like I'm being resilient. And for me, it is difficult because I've crafted my life in a way that is very comfortable. So stepping outside of that is when I do feel like, oh, okay, I am a resilient person. I do not think I'm a resilient person a lot of the times. But when I am like, that person said blank, blank, blank about me and did blank, blank, blank to me, and I gave grace, then I feel like I was being resilient because that is not something that comes easy to me.
Thank you for that very thoughtful answer. I feel like you're not alone with staying in your comfort zone or defaulting to your comfort zone. I think we all do that as humans. And I think a part of being resilient is stretching ourselves to grow and challenge ourselves to do something different that is uncomfortable. And so I love that you know that you have the insight to realize that in those moments you are being resilient, but there are other times that you're also being resilient, in addition to the times where you're giving people grace. There are other
Sure.
times that you're probably not
Sure. I mean,
recognizing
when I
that you
started
are
teaching at
exhibiting.
Maribel, I had to be resilient for a while there. It was tough sledding for me in the beginning. Yeah. So I know I've been resilient at times, but now I do feel like I look for opportunities to grow, and that is hard for me because I have, kind of made a solid little life for myself, and so it's easy to sit in that and relax, and I don't, and so I have to kind of be mindful to try new things that can make my life better, and so that takes a lot of resiliency for me. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Does that come with age or wisdom that you're saying you're trying to encourage yourself to come outside of your comfort zone sometimes? Has that always been the case for you, or is this just something that's developed with age and wisdom?
It developed with age and wisdom for me. I think as a young person, living, it was a tougher thing for me. So I think my resiliency as a young person was a lot of what maybe these kids might go for. There was some, there's some poverty, there's some abuse in the home, and things like that were kind of big deal things that I had to be resilient, I think, to get through. But when I started kind of my career, and I started doing well with that, even in the beginning before like winning any awards or anything like that, I was well received for my work. And then I was kind of settling into, oh, it is very easy for me to teach like I did last year because how I taught last year worked out really well. Now I do not do that. Now I am like, I can give my kids something better, and in the summertime, I'm thinking about that better thing that I can do for my classroom. And it's funny to say, but like if somebody talks to the Paris, who one has been in my class for 10 years and the other 8 years, so we are quite a unit. Um, they would say no. He definitely tries different things and stretches out every year, um, because I would be resting on my laurels, and I think that was an old thing. It was like, okay, sure, you're good at this thing, but be better. Try to find a way to be
Yeah,
better.
yeah, I like that.
Hmm.
Kareem, what made you smile today?
All the things. Let's see. I mean, if you've been in a self-contained classroom and you're not smiling, woo, I don't know who you are. But so I would say, first of all, the first thing that made me smile was we have a new student who started last week, and that student has the hardest time with names, and she breaks down everybody to what they look like. It's the funniest thing ever. So I have been tall guy for for 5 days. And my parents were this or that lady, or so she's all over the place. And today she was leaving and said, "Hey, tall guy, Mr. Neal," and I was like, "No, you did not." And so she was like, "Yes, I did." And we actually start laughing right there on the spot. So that was really cool. Um, and I think about even then after school, because I think I have a lot of stories with my students that make me smile. But I was like with my staff after school, and the semester was over, our students left. It was a half day today. And so we were here by ourselves, kind of working and doing things like that. And we had three self-contained classes at Maryville. We all sat in my room and just kind of talked about the semester, and not the semester, the term, sorry, from January to now, and just all the fun things that happened. And so that made me smile because you realize everybody is um, in this, and everybody really cares a lot. It is such a great staff at Maryville. I wish more people could see the work that we were doing. A lot, and it happened a lot. When I say more, like during 2019 and 2022, people were up in my classroom all day. But I welcome people to come, and I have a lot of the CBT teachers. I feel like this is for you, not for your listeners, but I have a lot of the CBT teachers come visit so they can see kind of the structure of how it's being run and things like that. But I think what people wind up doing is feeling like the love that's there. And so, yeah, so it's a really cool place to be. I call it my Arizona home because I've been
Uh,
there. 17 years at Maryville is the longest I've been anywhere in Arizona. I have not
wow.
lived in a place that long in Arizona. I've not worked in any other spot that long in Arizona, and so it's my place. Room 421 in Maryville.
I love that. Your response makes me think of a different question. Do you think it's important to find reasons to smile um, just throughout our day or throughout our week? Uh, if so, why?
Extremely, and that is a lesson that I learned from my mom, who is also my favorite person. Um, you know, we were going through it for a while. I think I touched upon some of the topics that made life a little difficult when I was a young person. For her, more so even than me, but for both of us. And she is just a person who loves life, though, regardless. And so she did always find ways to show me that there's so much joy in life, even with hurt. And
Mm,
wildly to me at the time, now I get it. But at the time, she would be talking about, the families on the street who are less fortunate. And I was like, what? We are broke, you know what I mean? Or, that kind of stuff for me was wild. And then, like I said, I knew she was going through some extra hard stuff on top of it. But she was out there worrying about the world. And so,
mm,
but also, I think in that, because of her resiliency as a person, she also then was able to still enjoy the times where she was not directly dealing with the hardship that she was going through. And so, then fast forward to me, and my first 10 years as a teacher, I was on that struggle bus.
thank you. Thank you for agreeing to take time out of your busy schedule right before vacation to speak with me and share your wisdom and your insight. I really appreciate it, Kareem. I hope this episode gave you some tools to connect with and increase your resiliency. I'm proud of you. Let's keep up the momentum. Follow Resilient Life on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube at Resilient Life Podcast. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.